In this lesson, we're going to be talking about spyware, rootkits, keyloggers, and other types of nasty, unpleasant software. So you may be wondering what spyware is, if you've never run across any and have been fortunate in that regard. What spyware is a type of software that installs on your system and harvests information from you and any other users on your system. Now, it may take advantage of vulnerabilities in your system in order to be installed. Like you could go to a website and have no idea that there's something that's taking advantage of a vulnerability in your browser in order to get itself installed. Installing itself with something that you actually want or think that you want. So let's look at a couple of types of spyware. And we can discuss as we go how some of these actually get installed. Here's one that's been around for a really long time. You may have actually run across it before. This is Cool Web Search. And if you've got this, you may actually see it manifest itself as having taken over the home page that displays when you start your browser up the first time. You may see a toolbar that's Cool Web Search, but what it really is adware. In addition to being adware, it's also been flagged as spyware. Now, there's a difference between adware and spyware. Adware is software that displays advertising while the program is running, but spyware is something that goes even beyond that and takes information from you and sends it back to somewhere else for either sale or additional processing. A number of different types of spyware you'll run across. Cool Web Search happens to be one of them. Here's another one called HuntBar, and that's also considered to be spyware. In addition to installing itself quietly and silently, it can actually download and execute other types of code, including just updating itself. So in addition to Cool Web Search and HuntBar, we have things like Internet Optimizer and Weather Studio and the Zlob Trojan. So spyware comes in all different shapes and sizes. It's something that you probably really don't want on your system. However, as an ethical hacker, there's a possibility sometimes that you may need to use these different types of software in order to perform some activities that you need to do. Like you may need to use social engineering as an example to get somebody to go to a website that will install one of these products. If it installs and it is able to extract information, then you've got a finding about the vulnerability in the web browser and the fact that the users aren't as educated and as aware of these types of issues as they probably should be. You may also go to websites that have these types of software attached to them in some way. So in addition to spyware, we've got something called keystroke loggers. Now, keystroke loggers come in both software and hardware forms. In the case of a hardware form, it would be inserted in line between your keyboard and your computer. And it would do exactly what it says. It just logs the keystrokes. In the case of software, it does the very same thing. It logs keystrokes. And the difference between hardware and software is with a hardware keylogger, you would need to come in and retrieve the keylogger at some point to pull the data off. With a software keylogger, it probably would have some sort of phone home component that would take your keystrokes, and it may actually do some processing in order to find, for example, usernames and passwords or credit card numbers or similar types of useful and interesting information. So keyloggers have been around a long time, actually. One of the early keyloggers was written for Unix systems in about 1983. So for about 30 years now, we've had keyloggers in one form or another, and it's one thing that you want to keep an eye on as best as possible. If you see something attached to your computer or your keyboard that doesn't look quite right, definitely do some investigation. These other keyloggers, which are software, are ones that you would need like an antivirus program in order to go hunting for and removing. The last type is a rootkit. A rootkit is designed to hide the existence of other types of malware. Now, how it works is it usually replaces system processes, so when you do things like a directory listing, it will hide the programs and files associated with that malware from being displayed. So if you did, like on Windows, if you went to Explorer, the Explorer program would have been replaced with something that worked exactly like it, but that hid the files from this rootkit from you. In a Unix system, if you did an ls, it would hide these files from being displayed in the file listing. It will also hide itself from process tables. So if you go to Task Manager in Windows, you won't see this show up because it's been hidden by the rootkit. Hiding the existence of the malware may also enable continued privileged access to systems, not only by evading detection, but sometimes there may be a backdoor associated with it as well that you're not aware of. This is where we get back to the concept of ethical. And there's a really fine line here in the use of these tools. You want to be really sure that you know what you're doing and how they work so they don't get out of control. You want to make sure that if you start playing around with a rootkit, that it's not installing this other type of malware on your target systems. Otherwise, you're violating probably the terms of your agreement, and certainly you're violating their trust as you're introducing actual bad software into their environment that they certainly didn't want, and you may not even know is there in order to be removed. You'll find a lot of different utilities around to look for and remove rootkits. Here's one here, the anti-rootkit utility TDSS killer. And on Unix systems, you'll find something called RK Hunter, which is Rootkit Hunter. And Rootkit Hunter will look for rootkits on Unix systems and look to remove them. So that's a few different types of potentially malicious software that may actually have some useful benefit to ethical hackers or penetration testers.